Steelworkers, really exciting to be here with you this morning. I'll talk about a few things before we get into our speech. So I'm lucky to be joined by my family here this morning, my three sons and their families, my grandchildren. They've all worked in and around the labor movement their lives, and this is as exciting for them as it is for me. And this is what we do we go to work for our families. And so having them here with me is particularly important. And then I want to explain something here. I don't know if you've noticed, but when I got out here, I sat in a chair. Now, it's not because my speech is going to be so long that I don't think I can stand up and make it through this thing, so I don't want you to get nervous about that. But, you know, you should know that I spent, to my right is my friend and brother, and Dave McCall, and Dave and I were millwrights together in the mill and worked together for years. And I had to carry Dave's ass so long that my back now is about... So I just want to explain that to you. I don't want you sitting up there thinking, feeling all that bad for me. After a while, you need a break. Look, brothers and sisters, I'm so honored to be here with you, and even happier to be talking with you face to face, in person, thousands of delegates strong, because it's been so long since we've been able to gather like this. The work we'll be doing here this week is the most important work we ever do as a union. Our Constitutional Convention gives us a chance to come together, share our accomplishments, and chart a course forward. It also gives us an opportunity to recommit ourselves to the fundamental mission of our union, to fight for better lives, stronger communities, and safer workplaces for every worker. And that's why we're here, because every worker should come home safely at the end of their shift, because every worker should have affordable health care, time with their families, and a dignified retirement, because every worker deserves a seat at the table and the protections of a union contract, and that's what the labor movement does. But more than that, that's what we do. Us, the United Steelworkers, we make these things happen. Our union, our members, our work, we stand up to greedy corporations that treat workers like they're disposable. We hold politicians accountable when they break promises to working families. We look out for each other across workplaces, across industry, across age and race and gender, across language and nationality. We have each other's backs because we are everybody's union. It's been 80 years. It's been 80 years since our union was founded. And I want to talk a little bit about the ways it's changed and grown and become stronger over time, thanks in large part to those who came before us. The original members of our union had big ideas, and first among them was inclusion. Our basic founding principle is that every worker, regardless of race, creed, age, gender, or sexual orientation, has a place in our union. That may seem simple, but it's really pretty revolutionary. It means that even though we may look different or come from different backgrounds, our work not only connects us, but it makes us stronger. And this has taken a lot of forms over the years. One way we've grown and diversified is through mergers. And I want in particular to welcome all the members of the former GMP who are participating in our convention as delegates for the first time. We've also organized across all our traditional sectors and beyond. Just in the past 5 years, since our last convention, we've welcomed baristas, football players, library workers, museum workers, tech workers, airport workers, prison chaplains, university faculty, and so many more. These workers, just like generations before them, joined our union so they could make better lives for themselves and their families. They joined us because for 80 years, we've been fighting for workers in every industry, in every corner of North America. They joined us because we are everybody's union. We work in metals, mining, pulp and paper, rubber, chemicals, glass, auto supply, forestry, energy production, healthcare, the public sector, higher education and service. We make things, we help people, we are the backbone of this economy, and we are never, ever going to let anyone forget how essential we are. Organizing new workers in our union has always been a top priority. Now, as we continue to face down record inflation, rampant economic inequality, and sustained corporate greed, we need to redouble our efforts if we want to save and grow the middle class. So I want to talk to you all about our union's major and organizing initiative that we launched earlier this year. If the pandemic taught us anything, it's that workers are hungry for unions. Over the past 2 years, we saw workers across North America fighting back against low wages, unsafe working conditions, and inadequate access to necessities like PPE and paid sick leave. Some quit, but others turned to unions like ours because they know we fight for ordinary people, that together we are stronger. There's no denying that the deck is stacked against us. Workers face retaliation for trying to organize. And even when their employers are held to account for violating their rights, for breaking the law, the process is painfully slow and the penalties are insufficient. Many of you know about our brothers and sisters at Kumho Tire, who after years of fighting, finally had their union election certified last year. Like so many workers, they were berated, threatened, forced to sit through mandatory anti-union meetings. Some activists were even fired for trying to organize. They had their first union election thrown out because it was so badly tainted by the company's behavior. But they persevered until they won. And that's the sort of thing we're up against. Corporations that will stop at nothing to keep workers from using their collective strength to balance the scales. And Republicans in the Senate who refused to even take a vote on legislation, the PRO Act, that would exact real consequences on corporations that violate workers' rights. And that's why we have to work even harder, even smarter. So here's what we're going to do, and its success lies in all of you. Nobody understands the challenges of workers are facing like our members, the people who day in and day out bargain strong contracts, stand up for workplace health and safety, file grievances, and keep management in check. So we're bringing in folks from across our union, and we're going to train them. Not everyone will become a full-time organizer, but as they advance through the program, they'll get the skills they need to have the tough conversations, to help people understand their rights and benefits of joining our union, to help their fellow workers help themselves through organizing. And then when our rank and file members are ready, we're going to deploy them strategically. We're going to expand our existing efforts into traditional sectors, and we're going to look at new industries. Take, for example, the paper industry. We already have a huge presence in the paper industry. We represent about 70% of the mills and 50% of the converters across North America. But there's always room to grow to help both new and existing members. Increasing our density means that corporations will no longer be able to pit workers against each other, non-union workers against union workers, as they try to cut corners and increase their profits. You know as well as I do that when workers stand together across an entire industry, it puts us in an even better bargaining position to negotiate higher wages and better benefits for all workers. We're doing the same thing in tire. Many of you know how hard we fought to keep unfairly traded tires from China and other countries from flooding our market and jeopardizing our jobs. And even though it was difficult, even though we had to prove our industries had been injured with job loss and reduced market share, we were successful. We were so successful, in fact, that foreign manufacturers started operating here in North America to get around the relief measures. So it shouldn't surprise any of us that these multinational corporations deliberately sought out locations for their facilities where they can not just get the biggest tax breaks, but where union density is the lowest, so they could get away with low wages and lack safety. In Richburg, South Carolina, there's a plant owned by a Singapore-based company called GD Tire. GD made big promises about job creation and wages, but so far, all they've done is take, soaking the community for all it's worth and treating workers like they're expendable in pursuit of even greater profits. So our organizers are there now, talking to workers, building a community coalition, and paving the way for workers there to take their future into their own hands. And we're going to keep doing this for workers in plant after plant, industry after industry. We won't stop. We won't stop until not only our jobs are secure, but we've helped workers across the economy achieve the best way to a good life, a union contract. While we do this, we're also going to be looking for emerging industries like offshore wind and electric vehicles, from mining and lithium, nickel and copper, to advanced manufacturing. We will be there, up and down the supply chain. We're going to bring our union to today's workers and tomorrow's. So far, this work's been incredibly exciting. Take Sparrows Point. At the height of the 1950s, there were tens of thousands of steelworkers at that mill in Maryland, earning good wages that help support families and communities throughout that region. It's been a decade since Sparrows Point closed its doors. But thanks to the work we've been doing with a company called U.S. Wind, we are bringing back jobs to this historic site. This is significant in so many ways. U.S. Wind is going to use this site to make the parts needed for their offshore wind development. And we're making sure that these manufacturing jobs throughout the clean economy will be good union jobs. But more than that, we're fighting so that as technology changes, we aren't dependent on China or anyone else on the cutting edge. This is just one example. We signed an innovative neutrality agreements with Rio Tinto and Talon to organize new mines being built in the U.S. And fresh off the heels of our first mining conference in decades, we're ready to supply the materials our nations need to build the future. Together, all this shows that even though we've grown and evolved, though we've been tested and tempered over time, though our jobs and workplaces may look different than they did 80 years ago, our goals, our fight for fair wages and safe working conditions remain the same. It shows that through ingenuity, perseverance, through hard work and dedication, we will continue to work together, support each other, and ensure our union and our communities can keep growing and thriving for 80 years and for another 80 years. An important part of keeping our union strong is developing new leaders, building out our bench so we have folks ready to come up as our more experienced members move on. In November 2019, we held our very first Next Gen conference, a huge success that helped inspire, educate, and empower nearly 900 new activists. The folks who were able to participate in the Next Gen conference got to learn about labor history, how we negotiate strong contracts, and the ways in which we as union members can give back to our communities and build ties with allies from across the globe. But even more importantly, our next gen of union activists got to participate in the power of our union, the power of our unity, the power of our coming together from across all our industries and occupations. And it was fun. The conference was an opportunity to remind all of us that what we do because it's right, because it's needed, but also because there's nothing more satisfying, nothing more powerful than reaching out and building relationships with our fellow union members. It's the heartbeat that keeps our movement alive. Since the conference, our union has continued building connections between young activists in the field in both our countries, Our next-gen members are deeply involved in elections in the local, state, provincial, and federal levels. They build ties with our allies across the labor movement and stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters on picket lines. They've spearheaded charitable campaigns and connect across generations with the members of SOAR. One of the big issues facing our next generation is resisting two-tiered contracts. Throughout our history, we've seen corporations attempt to turn working people against each other, divide us along the lines of race or gender or ethnicity so they can more easily dominate us in the workplace. These sorts of contracts meant to divide us by age are no different. That's why I'm pleased to tell you that in 2018, after years of activism by our next-gen members and others, the Quebec government passed a landmark labor law reforms prohibiting employers from imposing two-tier pension and benefit plans in that province. It's an incredible victory, not just for young people, but for all workers. Corporations try to exploit our differences, but what they get instead is relentless, unwavering solidarity. And I have to tell you, brothers and sisters, every time I get the opportunity to talk to our next-gen activists, I become more and more confident that our union's future is bright. I know that our union can overcome any challenge because the past few years have been filled with them, requiring all the ingenuity and creative thinking we could muster. The biggest challenge was, of course, COVID-19. And although I know everyone experienced the pandemic a little differently, I want to commend every single one of you for the work, your resilience, and your commitment that you've done. You did the essential work of keeping our economy running with unprecedented pressures. You kept the lights on, the water running, the shelves stocked, our children safe. You made sure we had fuel, toilet paper, life-saving medicine, so many things more. And through it all, we found ways to do the essential work of the union too, to reinvent our communication network so we could continue to negotiate contracts, process grievances, and go to arbitration. We elected officers, and we keep our members safe. I can't say enough about our health and safety committees and everyone else who worked so tirelessly so that we could have PPE, hazard pay, paid sick days, and other life-saving protections. This is truly what it means to be part of a union, to be part of everybody's union. This unyielding dedication to watching out for each other and helping each other through tough times. And it wasn't just in the workplace that our strength as a union shone through. Our locals and our members donated time, money, food, even their own PPE, so that our frontline workers could have a shot at beating this disease and helping the most vulnerable when they had nowhere else to turn. And I'm truly humbled by your generosity. I'd like to take a moment also to talk in particular about our union's healthcare workers. Even before the pandemic, these 50,000 members face serious challenges in both Canada and the US. Problems like short staffing, the corporatization of medicine, and the ever-present threat of workplace violence. But with the pandemic, they became not just workers, but in many cases, surrogate families to patients who were cut off from their own support network. These members risked their lives and the health of their own families to care for the sick and dying, and in many cases, they did it with limited resources. So I'd like you to join me in applauding them for the work that they've done. I'd also like to call out some of the important work we did together to help our healthcare members and all workers. We negotiated essentials like pandemic pay. We pushed OSHA for an infectious disease standard. We joined with allies in suing the Trump administration over its failure to provide adequate PPE, like reusable respirators, N95 masks, and gloves to essential workers. We fought and will never stop fighting so that our members get the respect they deserve, so that their employers recognize the sacrifice with more than just words and empty gestures. We're making sure that every worker who was called a hero is and will always be treated as a hero. The pandemic also revealed some simple truths that we as union members have known for a long, long time, but it can no longer be swept under the rug. Things like the disgraceful state of our nation's supply chains and how dangerously dependent we become on other countries for our basic life-saving necessities. Things like our nation's failure to adhere to any kind of manufacturing policy except to let corporations make as much money as they can, rewarding shareholders while leaving communities across our nations to pick up the pieces when they ship jobs overseas. Things like how important it is to have a union to protect you, how important it is to have a union contract to protect you. Almost all of you have gone into bargaining at least once since our last convention, and many of you in negotiations now. In the last few days, we've concluded bargaining with the tire industry and our sort of three biggest tire companies, and it's out for ratification now. When we leave here, we're going to return back and complete the bargaining we have going on in the steel industry. All of you should have received a copy of the officer's report. I'd encourage you to look at it very carefully and share it with your members so that you can see the truly impressive breadth of work we've done since we were last together in our convention. Together, we negotiate thousands of contracts, and with many of them, that process goes smoothly. We prepare, we research, we build power, we build out our communication networks, and then we sit down at the table, and when everything goes the way it should, we hammer out a good deal that takes into account our contributions to the company's success. And we've gotten some good deals, brothers and sisters, as you can see in this report. But we all know that it doesn't always go that way. Sometimes these companies, they're short-sighted. I was really going to call them something else, but I shouldn't. They're just too stupid to get out of their own way. Oil companies making money hand over fist right now, and they still made us fight for every inch of the pattern agreement we reached earlier this year. It's the same across our industries. At Ardagh, Kaiser Permanente, Arconic, and others, it took the threat of our collective action. It took our preparation, our communication, and our solidarity to bring them in line, because through it all, we know the power of our labor. We know who makes our facilities run, who does the real work, but sometimes they forget. They force us to strike, like we did at ATI and Western Forest Products and Special Metals at Glencore. Or they think they can break us by locking us out, like they did at Exxon, ABI, Care Partners, and far too many others. There are times when we're truly everybody's union. This is when we come together, when we back each other up and we lift up each other's voices and we respond as one. We go to each other's picket lines. We make sure there are Christmas presents for each other's kids when their parents can't work. We say to these pig-headed bosses who think they can run a company without us, who think they can replace us like we're parts of a machine, we tell them loud and clear that an injury to one is an injury to all of us, and that we, the United Steelworkers, will never, ever give up the fight. Another thing the pandemic reinforced, something that we've always known, but others can no longer ignore, is the idea that voting matters. And that we have to make it as easy as possible for everyone to access the ballot box. whether they do it in person on election day, or they drop it off in a ballot to a secured box, or they do it through the mail. But we all know we have to go beyond just voting and getting out the vote. We have to elect the right people, people who will fight for our priorities, who will help working families rather than billionaires and corporations flush with dark money and intent on using our political system to get even richer and more powerful. And you're going to be hearing from some of those folks this week, people from both our countries who've demonstrated time and again that they're willing to go to the mat for us and for all working people. We are, and we will always be, a union that fights for good contracts. We bargain good contracts, and we enforce good contracts. This is who we are. But even 80 years ago, our founders understood that there could be no good contracts, no bargaining as equals with our employers, no free or fair union elections if the people in power, our elected officials, work against us. They set down in our founding principles the idea that we need to ensure there's legislation to protect workplace health and safety, our right to organize, and our ability to use our collective power during bargaining. Corporations will always have more money to spend than we do on elections. What we have is our voice. And just like in bargaining, joining our voices together makes them exponentially stronger. And just like in bargaining, when we engage in political action, we want to hear about our members' priorities, about your priorities, so that we know which issues to put forward and where we need to deploy our collective strength to get what we need out of our elected officials. It's everybody's union, and so we need to hear from everybody as we chart our course forward. That's why in 2019 in the U.S. we launched Your Union, Your Voice campaign, and why we revisited it again this year. I hope that everyone in this room is familiar with Your Union, Your Voice, that you took out time to fill out our union-wide survey or were able to participate in one of the hundreds of in-person town hall meetings. The feedback we've gotten has been invaluable in determining our strategy and engaging with candidates. We heard that your top concerns were affordable health care, retirement security, and labor laws that support our ability to form unions and negotiate strong contracts. We took this information and together we got to work. While I know many of you worked tirelessly on this front, I want to thank in particular our SOAR members and our Women of Steel activists. Older folks arguably had the most to lose in the early days of this pandemic, before we had the protections of life-saving vaccines. But instead of letting the pandemic slow them down, it only renewed their urgency in helping as many people as possible engage in the democratic process. These activists wrote thousands of postcards and made thousands of calls urging our active and retired members to check their registration status, support pro-labor candidates, and make plans for voting. They undertook Herculean efforts to vote safely themselves, and they helped their neighbors do the same, going so far as to drive them to the polls. They, like so many of you, truly embodied what it means to be everybody's union, finding a need and fixing the problem, so that we all come out stronger on the other side. And our work paid off. Together we helped elect the most pro-union president we've seen in our lifetimes. A president that doesn't just say the word union, but has been doing everything in his power. He's been doing everything in his power to help working people. Look, I want to take a second and talk about this president. The work he does and his sense about unions doesn't come because he's pandering to us, that he thinks he owes us for his election. And it's not that he's nostalgic about unions. This president sees unions and our ability to collectively bargain as the path back to rebuilding this middle class, is to giving everybody a shot in life. And so He does this out of a sense of rebuilding our nation and to giving us back the economic base that we need. And this is not just pandering to us for the sense of it. This is an honest economic policy to rebuild our country. And this president is doing more than any president ever in the history of our country to recognize and foster and build labor unions. Things like making sure the Department of Labor can truly serve the interests of workers, rather than trying to break our collective power as it did under previous administrations. Things like signing executive orders on worker organizing and empowerment to ensure the federal government's working to grow union density. Together, we maintained a pro-union House that passed legislation like the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, the PRO Act, and a workplace violence protection bill to help make sure our healthcare and social service workers are safe on the job. And while we don't have enough of a majority in the Senate to get these two bills up for a vote, by working together as a union, we were able to achieve the simplest majority, one that allowed us to move forward with some of our other priorities. For example, after nearly a decade of tireless work, led by our rapid response activists, we've been able to achieve a huge victory for 120,000 active and retired USW members who stood to lose their pensions through no fault of their own. And these troubled multi-employer pension plans began to fail as a result of corporate greed, deregulation, and economic instability. So we leapt into action, USW members, retirees, and other activists, all across our sectors, all across our union, made thousands of calls, thousands of postcards, and made the rounds of the U.S. Capitol to demand Congress stabilize these struggling pension plans. This steadfast commitment to helping one another paid off, and in March 2021, Congress earmarked funds to safeguard the pension of more than 1 million workers and retirees. This would never have happened without this administration and the Congress that we elected in 2020. Let me say that again. Past leaders, they had the opportunity to address this problem, but they didn't. It took our votes, our voices, our work electing these leaders to make this change. Your advocacy, your refusal to back down, your voices coming together made our country better. We united behind our brothers and sisters who deserve, just like everyone deserves, to have a dignified retirement, and we won. One of the other major victories that we achieved through our political activism was in infrastructure. This campaign, like so much of our work in recent years, began with the feedback you gave us through our surveys and in these town hall meetings. You told us that you valued fixing the nation's roads, bridges, water systems, communication networks, and other critical infrastructure using union-made materials and creating good union jobs. We brought these priorities and all of our advocacy to the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. And its passage represents a major win for hundreds of thousands of USW members and their families. Thanks to our work, Steelworker members will be helping to build the broadband network in places like Colorado and Maine, build new highways in West Virginia, and bring clean drinking water to people in Michigan and Kentucky and so much more. And with all of our union's major wins, this was truly a collective one. From coast to coast, our locals wrote letters with their employers, highlighting the work they do, the products they make, and we sent them to key decision makers in the White House. Individual union members signed postcards and made calls to their elected representatives. Now, as we look to the future, we'll need to keep up the momentum to maximize the payoff for our members. We'll need to connect the infrastructure funds with the projects in our communities need the most, using the materials we make the best. Our political work paid off in Canada, too. Through our Steelworkers Vote program, we're building out a core of political activists that we can deploy in provincial and federal elections to support candidates who share our values, and it will support laws and policies that will help working people. And they've been working hard, distributing political material, having member-to-member conversations in our workplaces, at plant gates, phone banking, participating in town hall meetings with candidates, and more. And while there's clearly more work to be done to elect more worker-friendly candidates in both our countries, our commitment and engagement is already making a difference. One of our biggest, most recent victories in Canada is the new right for unions like ours to file trade cases, much as we do in the United States. Unfair trade takes a lot of forms. Sometimes it's an illegal subsidy. Sometimes it's dumping. Sometimes it's circumvention. But regardless of the form it takes, our members across our industries, across our countries, experience the impact of unfair trade every single day as they struggle to keep their plants open and their communities intact. That's why this win's so significant, because nobody understands, like we do, the devastating real-world effects of unfair trade. This victory in Canada, like so many others of our victories, came as a result of hard work at every level of our union. In particular, it was the result of our members who testified in close to 30 cases demonstrating the impact of unfair trade on us, our workplaces, and our communities. And earlier this year, I'm excited to tell you, we filed our first case in Canada, the first time that a Canadian union has been the lead on a trade case. As a result of our work, the Canadian Border Services Agency has found evidence that Chinese manufacturers were dumping mattresses and imposed provisional duties that'll help 1,000 of our members across that industry in Canada. I want to say this again. This would not have been possible without our advocacy, without our political engagement, our work to elect the right people and push them to do the right thing. Now, as our members in Canada become increasingly involved in trade cases, we're going to become even more powerful as a union. We'll be able to work even more closely between our two nations to shut down anyone who tries to exploit our markets and steal our jobs. It's important that we work together as a union on these issues because we know that free trade agreements don't just hurt workers in the U.S. and Canada. They hurt all workers as global corporations force us to compete against each other in a race to the bottom on wages, on health and safety, on environmental standards. But when workers in other countries have real protections, when they can form real unions and negotiate fair contracts, not only will their standard of living go up, but there will be less incentive for corporations to offshore our jobs. That's why our union stands in global solidarity with other unions around the world, including many of those whose guests are joining us here today. And we do this in a number of important ways, through our alliances, through our participation in global labor federations like Industrial and UNI, through the Steelworkers Humanity Fund, and through other donations many of you have been making to help our brothers and sisters in the Ukraine and elsewhere, through your advocacy on renegotiating the failed trade agreements like NAFTA and pushing for greater protections for workers across the globe, because this work, this effort, this courage it took to look beyond ourselves is what it takes to be everybody's union. We fight for fair wages and safe working conditions for workers the world over, because there could be no lasting answer to this corporate greed until all the workers are treated with dignity and respect. Earlier this year, the research firm Gallup surveyed Americans regarding their confidence in a variety of institutions, things like Congress, the Supreme Court, tech companies, big corporations. And unsurprisingly, and I imagine this may be true in Canada too, they found that people's faith in every single one of them went down, except one, organized labor. There are a lot of reasons. There are a lot of reasons for people to trust unions. I think the most important one is that we don't just fight for what's right, we stand up for each other. We empower each other. Our health and safety department just this summer published a book on a stop work authority, and I'd encourage you to look at it. The ability for people, if they think a job is unsafe, to tell the boss, I'm not doing that. This idea that when workers feel that what they're doing isn't safe, they can stop it and do it until their concern is resolved. It's built on a fundamental truth. There is no work or health and safety empowerment without workers being able to shut down a job. As our union working together across industries and locations, we're going to provide that power. This year, we marked the 30th anniversary since the West Stray Mine disaster in Canada killed 26 workers. And it's an important opportunity to consider what we're doing and why. Only as union members do we have enough power to press for rigorous inspection in our workplaces. And to further build that power, we're providing multilingual resources for our brothers and sisters who may not speak English or feel confident speaking up because of their immigration status. We're developing resources on occupational disease and holding training so our members have the skills, have the power to keep themselves and their communities safe. And we're keeping the memory of those killed at Westry alive by continually pressing our government in Canada to enforce the law that says corporations can be held criminally accountable for preventable deaths and injuries on a job. We're also empowering each other outside the workplace, in our communities and beyond, through our civil rights and human rights departments. We work to combat discrimination. We help to empower people of color, LGBTQ+ people, people of indigenous communities, and people fighting everywhere to be heard. When one of our members was threatened with deportation, his union brothers and sisters packed the courtroom during his hearing and fought for him until he was free. And as a result of the leadership and courage that took, they were able to bargain language into their contract that says that if a member is detained for immigration issues, their job will be protected. That's what it takes to be everyone's union. The selfless dedication to dignity and justice. But more than that, it's trusting one another. Secure in the knowledge that as union members, we're never alone. Part of what we've realized as a union, part of what we learned over the past 80 years as a union, is that it's not enough to just keep our bodies healthy. We have to attend to our mental health too, providing holistic resources that support workers whatever they need. In both our countries, we've begun negotiating domestic violence language into a number of our contracts, so our fellow members have the time and resources they need to protect themselves, to do what they need to do after they leave a dangerous situation, and to maintain that stability over the long term. We've also continued to build our Veterans of Steel program. We're helping connect our vets with union resources unique to their needs, mental health care, sample contract language for military leave, and most of all, community within our union to help each other in ways that only veterans can. And we're working together to help our members both before and after natural disasters. The hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, and fires that have become all too common as our climate changes. This includes deploying specialized emergency response trainers, or CERTs, to provide health and safety training to those in vulnerable areas like Puerto Rico, both before and after natural disasters strike. I'm also proud to tell you that since our last convention, we've given more than $1.2 million in support of thousands of our members who've been impacted by natural disasters through our Steelworkers charitable and education organization. But it's not just money that our members provide to each other. It's not just money we give each other, it's real solidarity. It's the rapid response, Women of Steel, and Next Gen networks that activate to help coordinate those relief efforts. It's the local union halls converted into temporary shelters and distribution centers for supplies. It's the utility workers who travel across state lines to ensure their brothers and sisters have power, and the healthcare workers who go to disaster-stricken areas to attend to the sick and injured. It's the awe-inspiring individual acts of heroism and generosity that are just too numerous for me to relate to you here. That's what makes us the best union in the world. And this is how we become everybody's union 80 years ago. It's how we're going to stay strong into the future. You, all of us, working together, relying on each other. We bargain contracts. We organize new members. We push our leaders to do the right thing. And whenever one of our brothers and sisters needs help, we lift each other up and we help each other succeed. It's clear that our challenges aren't going away. Companies aren't going to magically stop price gouging under the cover of inflation, and CEOs are never going to stop prioritizing their profits. We need to find ways to live with this virus that doesn't exact a heavy toll on our frontline workers, and we have to continue to fight for racial justice and gender equality. We have tough fights ahead of us at the bargaining table and in both our capitals. But as I look out at you, gathered here for the first time together in 5 years, I can't tell you how proud I am to be your president. Because the strength of our unity, our willingness to grow and change, our desire to meet any challenge head on together, that makes us unstoppable. That makes us Steelworkers. Thank you.